What's up, everyone? Welcome to another lesson, another short and sweet one. Today we cheat in 3D and 2D at the same time. Cheat with 3D and AI. This lesson is all about inspiring you to take more shortcuts in 3D. We will create the foreground in this image, we will create landscape in this one, and we will create the facade material of this church. We will use dirty tricks and that opens the doors to really cool results. Let me show you. Okay, so let's start off with this scene. It's a great scene, kindly provided by one and the only Ewelina Lekka from L3D Design. Great Polish artist, definitely look her up. All the social medias are in the description down below. But anyway, using this scene, we want to talk about creating the foreground. Right now, it's quite detailed. We have all this grass, rock, everything is kind of nice in the crevices between the rocks. And all that takes time. Pays off, but it's pretty time consuming, not gonna lie. So what if we tell you that we can achieve the similar result in a matter of 30 minutes? Let's do the foreground from scratch. First off, we create a simple plane and roughly model it to match the shape of the rock. We apply a super duper basic material into it, just some generic stone material, and I will show you how it looks in interactive mode. And there's not much detail here, no displacement, it's flat, but that's fine. One thing that's going our way already is the shadow. You can notice the shadow of the tree that was previously falling on the rocks, right now is falling on the texture. I think that's a nice touch, and you'll see how it helps us later down the road to blend everything together. And believe me or not, we are almost done with 3D. The last thing we can do here is applying another material, some generic vegetation or grass material to the very same surface. Something that will be green, and in this particular case, we went with the moss texture. The scale of it, is very small, so from this camera angle, it looks terrible. It looks almost like a flat layer of color, but that's good. And 3D stage is done. I don't know how you feel about it, but let's move on. Now we need to actually start doing something. So let's blend the rock and grass layers together. We want to create an impression similar to these cracked rocks here. And just to make our life easier, we will draw the lines similar to what we had before. So we will just overlay our renderings, but this is just, like a cheat that we want to do here. We take a fairly hard brush and start painting this layer over the rock layer. Of course, it doesn't have to be perfect like the previous one, but we like how the composition worked with those lines that created the crevices, so we'll take advantage of it. Now we can turn this image off, and we see how awful it looks, and you could almost consider it useless, but actually we're on the right track. In an abstract way, this tree shadow again, I think is blending those together, so keep that in mind. Also, we can add a little bit of detail here. For example, we can use a grass brush and improve the edge on the top. Want to have the more grass-like edge on the top and more or like a stone-like edge on the bottom. So you leave the bottom edge as it is. And one last thing is to add a bit more nuances on the stone. We can create a curve adjustment layer, lower down the midtones here, put it under a mask and start brushing in some darker areas. Same as with the grass, we can choose a custom brush and shape this rock a little bit more. We are doing our best to make it look more dimensional, and we hope Magnific will take all of our efforts into consideration. And that's about it, Beautiful. Okay, so now is the time for creative upscaling. And finally, we are in Magnific. This is where magic happens. Even though everything so far looked super janky, we have lots of confidence it will work. The key is to give Magnific a great deal of freedom. We can do it by upscaling by 4 times or even 8 times. We can do it by raising the creativity, we can lower the resemblance, we can obviously use prompts, so yeah, let's see how it works. We have a few versions, each with the prompt Scandinavian skier coast, cracked rocks with wild vegetation, settings of creativity at 5, HDRI -1, resemblance -2. We have the 8-time upscale, which is important, and another aspect, we downsized our image to half resolution before uploading it. And as you can see here, the change is unbelievable. We get everything for free. It's insane just how it works. Here we have another insane result. In this one, we downside the image not only by half, but to a quarter of resolution. So the initial image is very, very small, just a fraction of pixels, but running it with 8 times upscale will bring us the resolution back. And here, the way the rock behaves with those clumps of grass, all these material connections seems really, really nice. I think there's a lot of good things happening. We are not paying attention to the building, we'll remove it later. Next test is using the nature landscape model instead of film and photography. This is, indeed a landscape, so maybe we can get some lucky accidents with this upscale. We have some cool moments here and there. We have those rocks, grass, etc. Maybe we can use it, but I think the previous tests were extremely juicy. So anyway, we can download everything and we can put it together. We can basically mask it somewhere here to this edge. And at this point, it's honestly just having fun. We have tons of different passes that we can stitch together. We spent like 10 minutes in 3D before, and as you can see, it already looks quite awesome. And it's obviously a bit different from what we had here. We won't get it like one-to-one pixel-to-pixel match, but I think it's definitely similar in terms of being realistic. We can even add those headers we had before. What if we just use Firefly for this? So we can select an area, type a prompt, and bam. There are many variations of that generative fill. And we can always run them through Magnific if you like. We can do selective parts, we can go to 3D. I'm not gonna lie, and we are speed running here, baby. So that's a really quick and dirty trick, but there are about millions of possible ways you can use it to your advantage. It's perfect for sketching, when you want to show something custom to your clients. It's perfect for testing different compositions, It's much more time consuming to figure out the landscape in 3D, so that way you can have a clear vision before you step into 3D and recreate it faster if you need to. Or just keep it, Both are fine. Either way, we are cheating here big time. Let's move on. Another example. We have a couple of those. This is another image done literally with the same technique. It might look crazy, but it's very, very simple actually. This is what we ended up with, and the best part is that we did this image in less than about 3 hours or so, which is pretty crazy, I'm not gonna lie. I'll run a quick time-lapse to show the full process. So starting off in 3D, we created a simple slope in 3D. We are outlining a simple path within it. And this is when we apply different textures to it. We apply a different sand textures. We apply scattering to it and just render different passes as quickly as possible. It's definitely not something any 3D artist is familiar with, but believe me, it can work. In Photoshop, we are starting off by fixing some smaller stuff and adding this shoreline using Firefly. And then comes the awkward part. We are using a basic brush to sketch out the grass onto the path and slopes. We are throwing some tree cutouts just to have some reference point on the right side, quickly trying to adjust them to the scene's depth. Keep sketching the grass around the new trees. It looks absolutely random. And we sort of need to remind ourselves that we shouldn't stress about it and just trust the process. It's fine. So we are adding more grass, pasting it on top of the photo and using Firefly to create some smaller areas. On the horizon, we are sketching some vague shapes that we will hopefully turn into forest later. And then comes the magical part. Things start coming together as we enhance it in Magnific. Same as before, we run it with different creativity, different resolutions, using different prompts. And after you come back, it's literally done in a matter of seconds. After a few touch-ups in Photoshop, we've got a decent environment. That's extremely fun, And it's the same technique, but it can go a long way. So I hope it's inspiring to seek for opportunities like this, quick and dirty ones. The best part is that this lesson is not over yet. Here's another quite charming example of exploring 3D and AI, going on shortcuts. In this case, we'll create a custom facade. And now the question is, what comes to your mind when you see a facade like this? How would you approach it? And at least for me, the first thing that comes to my mind is either custom unwraps or maybe, I don't know, something like Substance Painter, but either or, that's a lot of work. And of course, we want to work smarter, we want to take advantage of AI again. And in this case, we rendered multiple versions of this building, just a selection of this building to have it really, really fast. And their name suggests what effect we had in mind. They range from the cleanest to the disaster, which kind of speak of itself. We have the semi-clean, we have something like more worn out. And we also have something that's totally destroyed. As you can see, we don't care about UV repetition, it doesn't really matter. So let's make the front facade just to demonstrate how this approach works. Okay, so we have all our layers in one folder. They are limited to the front facade, so now we can start doing our thing. We can hold left Alt and click on the mask. This will create a black mask, and now we can brush some details in. First, it's a loose pass, just to have just something appear here and there, just on the surface. And next up, we have more imperfections. Let's say that somewhere around these regions, something more interesting could happen. We use the soft brush without caring too much about the transition between the layers at this point. We can also add some exposed bricks. Maybe I'll do some kind of plaster peeling off or something. And at this point, I think it looks great. Once we are happy with the result, we can turn to Creative Upscalers again. And here, just a reminder, we are literally doing the same thing as we did in the first lesson. So we can collapse everything, Ctrl, Alt, Shift, E, the most beautiful shortcut in the world. And then we can make a rectangular selection, Ctrl J, duplicate the selection, and we have our layer ready to export. Click Export as PNG, click Save, and done. Beautiful. Let's move on to Magnifique. Here we choose the upscaler, upload our image. We can type in, for example, facade, old, plaster facade. We can give it a bit of creativity. We can even leave HDRI as it is. We'll do one pass with twice upscale and a second one with 4 times upscale. And that's it. Okay, moving on, fast forward. We are back in Photoshop. We can hold Ctrl and click left mouse button to make selection. Then we drag and drop both upscales from Magnifique. One had a double upscale, so we need to reduce it by half, which is 50%. The second upscale was 4 times, so we need to set 25%. We apply black mask with the Alt key pressed. Finally, we can remove the old layers to keep everything nice and clean. And now we can draw in whatever we like. We immediately see that the detail comes out from Magnifique or whatever creative upscaler you use has this amazing sharpness. We can see that 4 times upscale provide even greater fidelity. And that's something you need to keep in mind. There's difference between 2 times, 4 times, the creative pass, the consistent pass, but we already covered it before. So there's a lot of interesting things happening. We can leave it, we can remove it. It's up to our stylistic preference, but that's the whole secret. We can render passes without worrying about any unwrapping or anything like that. And then we do a custom blend of these materials. It saves an incredible amount of time, and this approach is very much viable in our commercial work. You can make custom wood shaders, custom roads, whatever. Options are just countless. So this is the end of this bonus lesson. We can dance on the edge of 3D being just ridiculous, of being good enough, and transform your images in post-production in a matter of minutes. I hope you have enjoyed it. Next up, we have a huge segment of making Mediterranean image and lots of really cool stuff there. Thanks and see you there.